I still remember the exact sound the conference room made when my uncle realized what I had done. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't a shout. It was a silence so sharp it carved straight through every argument he had rehearsed. He looked down at the stack of notarized documents I placed in front of him, the sale agreements, the bank transfer confirmations, and the legal seals still warm from the clerk's hand. His eyes darted across each page, searching for a loophole, a technicality, a miracle that would overturn what he was reading. But there was nothing left for him to fight. His signature, signed weeks earlier under the belief that I would never have the funds, stared back at him like a verdict. "You bought it," he whispered, disbelief cracking in his voice. "You bought my entire 40%. I didn't sit. I didn't blink. I stood across from him with my hands folded, keeping myself steady. My heart was racing, but my voice was calm and firm, the kind of tone you earn only after months of being dismissed, belittled, and steamrolled. "Yes," I said. "And the transaction finalized at 9:17 this morning. You're no longer part of the board. Effective immediately." His chair creaked as he leaned back, stunned, furious, humiliated. Around us, the rest of the board watched in a silence weighted with shock. Some hid a flicker of satisfaction. Others battled confusion. But everyone understood one thing instantly. The power dynamic that had ruled this company for decades had just been rewritten in a single morning. My uncle's face reddened, then paled. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but he knew the truth. His own arrogance had signed his exit papers. He had agreed to a buy-sell clause he assumed I would never be able to execute. Too young, too inexperienced, too sentimental, he had said. A woman in her mid-60s, he claimed, had no place trying to modernize a manufacturing empire built by men. He believed I would stay permanently under his shadow. But shadows only exist when something blocks the light. And that morning, as he reread the contract he had so carelessly dismissed months earlier, I watched him realize I had stepped out of his. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Revenge doesn't always look like fury or triumph. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing quietly in a sunlit boardroom, holding the truth in her hands after being underestimated one too many times. He lowered the papers. "How long have you been planning this?" I looked him in the eye. "Since the day you told me I'd never be more than your assistant." And that was when his voice broke, not from anger, but from the dawning understanding that everything he had tried to deny me, control, respect, leadership, had become the very tools I used to dismantle his power. That morning marked the turning point. But the real story, how I, a woman supposedly too young at 65, outmaneuvered my own uncle, began long before that boardroom showdown. And it all started with how I was raised to believe that family meant fairness, until the day I learned that some people hide behind that word the way others hide behind a locked door. My name is Margaret Ellison, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived a life full of discipline, subtle ambition, and an unwavering belief that hard work should speak louder than ego. For most of my adult years, I carried myself as the steady backbone of our family's manufacturing company, a business my father built from a two-person workshop into a regional supplier of industrial components. I grew up sorting bolts and fittings at a steel table barely reaching my waist, breathing in the warm scent of machine oil, hearing the rhythmic clang of metal against metal like a heartbeat guiding my childhood. My father taught me precision. My mother taught me diplomacy. And somewhere between those lessons, I shaped myself into a woman who could quietly, and effectively, manage chaos. But I never imagined I would need to use those skills against my own blood. At 65, I am not the frail retiree some expect. My joints may protest on cold mornings, and I have learned to appreciate good arch support, but my mind is sharp, my patience long, and my tolerance for disrespect almost non-existent. When I speak now, I speak not with the tremor of insecurity but with the clarity of a woman who has lived enough life to know when someone is trying to manipulate her. I've outgrown the need for approval. I've survived heartbreak, menopause, raising two daughters largely on my own, the slow loss of my husband to illness, and the quiet ache of watching siblings drift apart over the years. So when my uncle, my father's youngest brother, told me I was too young to run the company, It didn't sting because I believed it. It stung because it revealed something I had refused to see, that he had never viewed me as an equal. Not at 25, not at 40, and not even at 65. He saw me as useful, dependable, loyal, but never capable of leading. I remember sitting at my kitchen table the night after he said those words, turning them over like cold stones in my hand. Too young. It was absurd, of course. But absurdity often hides cruelty. What he meant was too female, too polite, too accommodating, too unwilling in his mind to seize control the way he believed a true leader must. But he didn't understand that leadership isn't always loud. It isn't born from dominance but from the resilience to rise each time someone tries to diminish you. At my age, I have learned the quietest person in the room is often the one imagining the long game, the only game worth playing. So when he dismissed me in front of the board, waving a hand as if shooing away a child, something in me settled, not with bitterness, but with certainty. The time for patience had passed. The time for strategy had arrived. I would not scream. I would not argue. I would not fight on his level. Instead, I would let truth, preparation, and his own arrogance carry the weight of consequence. And as you will see, that weight became far heavier than even I anticipated. My family has always walked a delicate line between affection and competition. We loved each other, yes, but we loved being right even more. My father, stern yet gentle, believed in fairness and structure. My uncle, his much younger brother, grew up in the shadows of those values but never embraced them. He admired my father, but envy simmered beneath that admiration like molten metal waiting for a crack. Growing up, I saw their differences play out in countless subtle ways. My father handled problems calmly. My uncle fought them loudly. My father valued process. My uncle valued shortcuts. My father mentored me for leadership. My uncle taught me to anticipate manipulation. When my father passed, the company transitioned to me and my uncle jointly, a 50% partnership that seemed balanced on paper but never in practice. My uncle always believed he deserved the majority simply because he was a man, and I was, in his words, the administrative type. Despite his condescension, I tried for years to make peace. Family has a pull that is hard to resist, an emotional gravity that convinces you to endure slights you would never tolerate from a stranger. My daughters saw the tension long before I admitted it. They would say, "Mom, he doesn't respect you." And I would brush it aside, telling them, "He's family." It's complicated. But complications can become cages. And mine tightened each year. My uncle controlled the boardroom not through intelligence but through intimidation. He raised his voice. He dismissed opposing views. He inserted himself into departments he didn't understand, then blamed others when his decisions failed. And yet, employees feared crossing him. They came to me privately with their concerns, their frustrations, their worries about the future. I became the company's quiet caretaker, the one who soothed the wounds he inflicted. For a long time, I convinced myself that role was enough. That keeping the peace was noble. That my father would want unity above all else. But unity built on imbalance is not unity at all. It is quiet suffering. And over time, I began to feel the subtle erosion of my own identity. Decisions passed me by. Credit bypassed me. Respect thinned. I watched the company my father built grow brittle under the weight of ego, and each invisible cut left its mark. I stayed not because I was weak, but because I believed loyalty mattered. But loyalty without reciprocity becomes self-destruction, and I was beginning to understand that truth in ways I could no longer ignore. What finally tipped the scale was not his anger, not his undermining, but something far simpler. The moment he looked at me, in front of an entire board, and declared that my age, rendered me incapable of leading. It was then I realized that if I didn't reclaim control, not just for myself but for the company's future, everything my father built would crumble under the weight of that arrogance. And as painful as it was, I finally accepted that the greatest betrayal often comes not from strangers, but from those who assume you will never fight back. The real unraveling began quietly, almost invisibly, the way most betrayals begin. I discovered discrepancies in our financial reports, numbers that didn't align with inventory, invoices that seemed inflated, contracts awarded to companies I had never heard of. At first, I assumed it was clerical error. I even defended my uncle to our accounting manager, insisting he would never hide transactions from me. But the truth came into view the way dawn breaks, slowly, then all at once. It started with a vendor contract, supposedly approved by both of us. Except I had never seen it. My signature was there on the digital copy, but the flow of the script was wrong. The loops, the angles. It was close enough to pass a casual glance, but I knew my own writing. When I confronted my uncle, he brushed it off with a laugh, claiming the vendor must have uploaded an older version. But the unease lingered. Then came the equipment purchase. 2 machines billed at triple the market value. I asked questions. He dodged them. I asked again. His voice hardened. He said I was being paranoid, that age was making me overthink things. Age. Again. That word slipped in like a blade. Over the following weeks, I dug into accounts I hadn't examined in years, trusting our systems too blindly. What I found chilled me. Funds diverted into shell companies, maintenance fees paid to businesses that had no online presence, consulting charges linked to his personal acquaintances. And every questionable transaction had been authorized by either him or by forged versions of my own signature. It wasn't just deceit. It was theft. Theft from the company. Theft from our employees. Theft from me. When I finally confronted him with the documentation, he didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled with the smugness of a man who believed himself untouchable. "Margaret," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this is how business works. You wouldn't understand. You never had the stomach for real leadership." I felt something inside me cool, then harden. Not anger. Not fear. Clarity. He wasn't just mismanaging the company. He was looting it. And worse, he believed I was too naive, too gentle, too old to stop him. That night, I sat alone in my study long after the rest of the house was asleep, surrounded by printouts, spreadsheets, signed contracts, copies of forged signatures. I realized with devastating certainty that I needed to act, not just for myself, but for every employee whose livelihood he was jeopardizing. My father's legacy was being siphoned off by greed, and if I continued to remain quiet, I would be complicit in its destruction. But confronting a man like my uncle wouldn't be enough. He thrived in confrontation, twisting narratives, manipulating guilt, weaponizing family ties. I needed a different weapon, one he never expected me to wield. Documentation. Legality. Strategy. Precision. He thought he had locked me out of leadership. He had no idea he was opening the door to his own undoing. Once I accepted the truth, my entire focus shifted. Quietly, methodically, I began building the foundation of a strategy that mirrored the precision of a military operation. I did not confront him again. I did not warn him. Instead, I observed, gathered, verified, and documented every inconsistency with the patience of a woman who had spent decades operating behind the scenes. My years of being underestimated became my greatest advantage. I hired a forensic accountant under the guise of a routine audit. I asked our legal team to review vendor contracts, framing it as a compliance update. I retrieved archived emails, comparing timestamps, signatures, and digital metadata. Every stone I turned revealed another layer of wrongdoing, fabricated expenses, double-billed services, personal travel hidden inside corporate budgets. My uncle hadn't just been stealing. He had woven an intricate network of self-enrichment that relied entirely on me never noticing. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone with the bank's fraud department. The representative was polite but firm. "Technically, Ms. Ellison, the transfer originated from your authenticated login," she explained. "Our system shows no sign of external compromise." My signature was forged. "We can escalate a claim, but it may take 60 days. 60 days. My savings, Everything I'd used to support myself through retirement, gone into the hands of someone who had both motive and access. By noon, exhaustion settled into my bones. Not because of the money, though that loss hit like a physical blow, but because it confirmed something I had tried desperately to deny. Someone wasn't just trying to scare me. They were dismantling my life, piece by piece, to stop me from pursuing the truth my father had protected. That afternoon, I drove to the old Marwood estate. Not to confront anyone yet. I wasn't ready. But I needed to see the place where my father's life had split in two, before and after the betrayal that had shaped everything. The estate hadn't changed. Still grand. Still immaculate. Still belonging to a family whose wealth had deepened over generations. As I sat in my car across the street, watching the tall iron gate, I saw a figure emerge from the house. Douglas Marwood's son, Jonathan. Nearly my age. Polished. Controlled. A man who'd grown accustomed to inheriting advantages. He walked to a waiting car, phone pressed to his ear. Just before he stepped inside, he turned, almost as if sensing he was being observed. His eyes scanned the street until they landed on my car. Recognition flared. Not of me, but of something else. Something he feared I might know. And the moment our eyes met, I knew. He was involved. Whether in the theft, the fraud, or the messages, I didn't yet understand. But the Marwoods had regained a company they never should have owned. And now they stood to lose everything. As Jonathan's car pulled away, I made a silent promise. I would not be scared into silence. I would not be bought off. And I would not let betrayal win again. Not this time. What I didn't know then was that uncovering the truth would cost me far more than money. It would cost me trust, safety, and illusions I had carried for decades. Because the betrayal wasn't only decades old. It was happening now. And from someone far closer than I imagined. The next morning, I sat in my father's old workshop, surrounded by the documents I had carried home from the safe. The smell of cedar and machine oil, his scent, clung to every board of the room. I let it steady me. I needed clarity, direction, a plan rooted in reason, not fear. So I did what my father would have done. I began documenting everything. I took photographs of each share certificate, scanned every contract, created a digital archive with timestamps. I labeled folders meticulously, just as he had taught me when I was 12 and helping him organize receipts for tax season. But this was more than record-keeping. It was reclaiming his voice. At noon, I met with an attorney recommended by a retired colleague, a woman named Evelyn Shaw, in her late 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-minded. Her office overlooked the courthouse, and files covered every surface in neat, towering stacks. I explained everything from the moment the key arrived. She listened without interruption, taking notes in tight, elegant handwriting. When I finished, she tapped her pen lightly against the legal pad. "What you have," she said, "is the kind of evidence that topples empires." I swallowed. "So the shares are valid?" "More than valid. They prove your father never relinquished ownership. If the Marwoods took control without his consent, or through coercion, forgery, or undeclared transactions, that's corporate fraud. Possibly criminal." The room felt smaller suddenly. "Are you in danger?" she asked. The question startled me. "Yes," I said softly. "I think so." She leaned forward. "Then we proceed carefully. First, everything gets duplicated and stored off-site. Multiple places. Second, do not confront anyone yet. Third, you tell no one else you're pursuing this, not even people you trust." My mind flicked to Lydia. To the hesitation in her voice. To her missing husband. "I understand," I said. Evelyn studied me a moment. "Your father hid these documents because he knew their value, and the danger. He must have believed the truth would matter someday." Her words struck a deep place inside me. The truth had mattered to him. He just hadn't lived long enough to reclaim it. When I returned home, I found my mailbox open, physically forced open, and inside was an unmarked envelope. My heart thudded painfully as I slid a finger beneath the seal. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. A photograph. Me, taken from behind, standing in the storage unit corridor the moment I opened the safe. I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone was following me, watching me, cataloging my movements. On the back of the photograph was a short message, typed in bold. Those documents do not belong to you. Walk away, or you'll lose more than money. A threat, direct and unmistakable. My first instinct was panic. But then something inside me shifted. Something old, something inherited from my father's quiet resilience. Fear sharpened into focus. I turned the photograph over again, studying the angle. It had been taken from the far end of the corridor. The figure I had seen that day hadn't been a coincidence. They were recording me. And if they knew about the documents, they might also know about the lawyer. I spent the rest of the day building a timeline, cross-checking corporate filings with the dates on the original certificates. Discrepancies appeared in almost every year. The Marwoods had amended ownership records without supporting documentation. They had issued new shares to themselves, diluting my father's stake, illegally. Log after log showed a pattern. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decades-long cover-up. By midnight, surrounded by papers and illuminated by the dim glow of my desk lamp, I discovered one final piece that made everything snap into place. A ledger entry showing a payout, 45 years ago, to a name I recognized. Not a Marwood. Not an employee. A person I had seen just yesterday, standing at Marwood's gate. Jonathan. He had been receiving money, quietly, regularly, from the company for decades. Money tied to irregular entries. Money tied to forged signatures. Money tied to the disappearance of my father's ownership. I stared at the name until my vision blurred. Jonathan hadn't just inherited his father's wrongdoing. He had continued it. My breath caught as headlights swept across my living room wall. A car had pulled up outside my house. Slowly. Deliberately. And it wasn't leaving. I turned off the lamp, letting darkness settle over the room. My pulse thudded in my ears as I moved quietly toward the window. I parted the curtains by an inch. A black sedan sat idling across the street, engine humming softly. The windows were tinted, the interior hidden. No one stepped out. No one approached my door. They wanted me to know they were there. A warning. A stalker's patience. A predator's first circle. I stood still, breathing through the rising surge of panic. At 64, fear feels different. Not as sharp, but deeper, reaching into places where safety used to live. But I'd lived quietly my entire life. Too quietly. I had allowed silence to sculpt me, shape me, cage me. This time I would not shrink. I drew the curtains closed. If they expected me to back down, they didn't know the woman my father raised. I spent the next morning gathering every document and duplicate into organized packets. I created 3 physical sets and stored one at Evelyn's office, one in a bank deposit box, and one in a locked suitcase beside my bed. Then, I took a step that changed everything. I contacted a forensic accountant. His name was Caleb Warren, early 40s, unassuming but with the calm, razor-precise questions of a man who had seen too many financial crimes to be rattled by them. He took one look at the documents and said, "Someone went to a great deal of trouble to hide this. Can you uncover everything?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "It'll take time. But yes." Next, I contacted law enforcement, not with accusations, but with a preventive measure. I reported the fraudulent bank activity, the threats, the mailbox tampering. I made a record. A time-stamped foundation for the storm I knew was coming. I felt my fear recede a little. Not gone, but harnessed. Then I made my boldest move yet. I confronted Lydia. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She arrived looking exhausted, her eyes ringed with dark circles. Richard is still missing, she whispered. And someone broke into our home office last night. My breath stilled. What were they looking for? I don't know. But they destroyed his files. All of them. Her voice trembled. Margaret. I think he was involved in something he didn't understand. Or maybe he did understand, and he just didn't tell me. I studied her, really studied her. The fear in her eyes wasn't feigned. Did he ever mention the Marwoods? I asked. Her gaze flicked up sharply. More than once. He said the company was mismanaged in its early years and that there were discrepancies in their old ownership filings. He told me it wasn't our concern. Except now it is, I murmured. She reached across the table, gripping my hand. Please. Whatever you're doing, stop. For your safety. For a moment, I softened. She was family, even in her flaws. But then I remembered the photograph. The forged transfer. The car outside my house. I can't stop, I said gently. Not anymore. Her face folded into something like grief. Then promise me you won't do it alone. I nodded, though in truth, I wasn't sure what the days ahead would require. That night, as I reviewed the documents again, my phone rang. It was Evelyn. Margaret, she said, her voice steady but urgent. You need to come to my office tomorrow morning. I've found something. What? A document that changes everything. And it ties directly to the Marwood family. My heart tightened. What does it mean? It means, she said quietly, your father wasn't the only one they deceived. A chill ran through me. And it means you're not the only one in danger. Before I could reply, I heard a sharp noise outside, metal scraping against metal. I stepped to the window. Someone was tampering with my lock.